this time.
Welcome to The Collective, where every conversation ignites a new perspective. Join us as we delve into the journeys of remarkable individuals, explore the art of growth, resilience, and the power of a shared mission as we strive to be better together.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the workshop. We are here today to talk about the cost of creation, and I am stoked for this one because these two gentlemen have been mega creating for the last little while. So I'm stoked to get in this. Well,
you haven't.
I mean, just a little bit. Doing my part. While I'm doing my part, you should do your part. Like the show, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, do all the good stuff. Get your emails when we go live, which is, of course, Wednesdays for the workshop, Fridays for the collective. And I want to get right into this. But before I do, make sure everybody is also signed up for the newsletter that just went out, edition 41, if I recall correctly.
Right. Yeah.
Just went out. Make sure you guys are signed up for that. If you haven't, you're late and should be doing it right now. Now, if you have any thoughts, questions, comments, anything at all, make sure you put them up in the comment section like this one right here. Great. Gray word 888. Now, is that Salty Jinx? I think
it is.
Salters. How's it going? Good to see you, buddy. Other than that, let's get right into the convo. Slav, how are you doing? You're just back home recently, right?
Yeah, I was away for a while. I'm back. Just trying to catch up, and that's pretty much it until I head out again in a couple of weeks. So, quick rotation through my family, parental duties, all of the things, and
check
the doors I go.
Out the door. I love it. Shaun, how's Mountains treating you now that you're all slept in?
Yeah, things are good. Catching up on a little bit of sleep, I would say, but I still need a bit more, that's for sure. I put up a photo yesterday, and because I don't have quite as much writing to do at the moment. I find my idle hands get me in trouble, and so I just walk into the kitchen, and there was all sorts of light coming through the kitchen window, just blazing, and I thought, oh, that'll be a really hard photo to take with all that backlight. So then all of a sudden I've got my camera on a tripod taking a photo of myself, in really difficult lighting conditions, and the photo was what it was. I wasn't trying to create content for the Instawebs. What I did notice was this: my freaking head yesterday was all kinds of confabulated, swollen. Like I looked like I'd just been put through the grinder, man. I look a lot more alive today, but yesterday I looked like I'd been through it. So I've been wearing it for a little while, I think. And so it's nice to see a little bit of sparkle in my eyes, I would say.
I was going to say you look much more bright-eyed, bushy-tailed today.
Yeah, for sure.
Because the last couple, it's pretty easy to tell when someone's jet-lagged. I mean, I don't know anybody that it doesn't show instantly, and it takes a while to get back. I was just talking to somebody about this. It's 9 full nights of sleep that you need to get to kind of recover before at an average. I think that is
my rule of thumb is for every hour change, you're looking at about a day of till you're back to quote unquote normal. And so we had 16-17 hour timeline change, and so maybe looking at a couple of weeks until back to normal. And right now, I got up at I guess 4 o'clock this morning, just bam, good jet lag, and but I feel way better. So it's just around the corner now on the jet lag.
I like it a lot. I'm glad to see you back in the game. That is the key. Dan C just jumped into this comment. Good morning, gentlemen. Today is none other than a gluteus maximus smashimus kind of day with 7 hours. I like it. It's getting creative with these. These are awesome every time. I look forward to them in the mornings. So let's get right into the cost of creation. When I sent you guys that message yesterday, what were your guys' first thoughts? Slav? Been a while. Seb, what do you got?
Yeah, it might be rusty a bit. Might be shaking some rust off here. I haven't been thinking much since I've been doing so many podcasts. Just on rails. The first thing that comes to mind, of course, is what what we were just talking about. I mean, yeah, you call it jet lag, and the first thing that came through my mind was it though? There is certainly a part of that physiological jet lag, of course, but man, the velocity at which you were going about doing business while you were over there was pretty mind blowing. Like let's call a spade, and I think yeah,
Yeah,
you put
preach.
you put little posts here and there, and people get a glimpse for maybe that was his writing day, and I'm like, no, he's been at this every night and every day for his entire vacation,
Mhm.
and I gotta raise my hat to D, in all fairness, and I know that she's all in and all the things, but man, that's a sacrifice, right? Like that's a
Yeah, for sure.
sacrifice for the family, and
For sure.
oftentimes when we're engaging in the creation process, that is a part of that temporary obsession that comes about, that has a reverberating cost on our families and all of everybody. And so not only is it physiological, spiritual, relational, like all of those things, there is a cost. And then we start breaking down all of these little, the little costs associated with creating something of meaning. So then we have to make sure that whatever it is that we create, we feel has the opposite effect, which is, what is it going to bring, and why are we now sacrificing so much? And is the desired outcome worth the squeeze, or the juice worth the squeeze, so to speak? And that's where purpose driven comes in, right?
Yeah, and it makes me think of like, what's the difference between the something having meaning versus something being obsessive? Because that is a very fine line. It can blur sometimes pretty quickly.
But the obsession is you. The meaning is whatever the outcome is. Those
Agreed.
are two different things, right? Like
Agreed.
you need, in order to reach the meaning, the desired outcome, and on something meaningful, there's two things that need to happen. Is A, it needs to be truly meaningful. That means that it generally supersedes you and how you feel about it. Like it is because I want to do it. You have to be honest. I was having this conversation with Nick Felber, who's been on the show before, like a couple of days ago, and we were just having a conversation about why we do the things we do, and why we tell ourselves we do the thing we do sometimes are completely at odds. And so if you look at this, for example, Nick was an infantryman, and obviously, when you ask him off the hop, he'll say the same as we all said. We chose a life of service to be, to be doing something as opposed to be on the sideline, to be, sacrificing on account of the collective, and all of the prepackaged answers. But I said to him after, then why are you an MMA fighter after, right? You were an infantry soldier because you like to fight, and you're a fighter because you like to fight. It's not for your mom, it's not for your daughter, it's not for your, all those things are proxies, and you can definitely roll whatever it is that you intend to do. But there's things way safer that you can do, that your kid doesn't have to see you get your head smashed in every time, that are going to bring more money. So let's be honest with why we're doing it for. So I guess the point I'm making here is, like, meaning has to be real, not made up. It has to be real.
Dig it. Sean, what do you got?
Yeah, and to add to that, I would also say that it's really good if you can have a very clear sense of why you're about to step into something. It's really good if you have a clear vision of why you're going to do it. But this book that I just finished writing, and that's really a collaboration between Seb and I. That's not just me writing all by myself in a cave and not not listening to anyone around me. That's a collaborative effort. As I was writing that, mm, I every day I didn't have an extremely clear vision of what I was doing. I started it with a literal vision of something kind of shooting across my mind, and it just made sense to me at the time. And so, I could have abandoned that vision, or I could have engaged with it. I chose to engage. But then every day from that point forward, there was days where I was going backwards rather than going forwards. I was turning circles. I was, going inside of myself and outside of myself and turning circles in myself. And so, for anyone out there who steps into something with a clear view of, I'm engaging with this purposefully, intentionally. This is for a greater reason than me. If that's how you can engage, that's great. But that might not stick around for the entire process. And it certainly didn't stick around for me for the entire process. So what I had to do was engage it in different ways. I had to give it other meanings. I had to hold myself accountable, first and foremost, of course. But when the mission wasn't compelling me to do what I had to do, like I'd take it upon myself to, like, I'm just not going to let my friends down, or I'm just not going to dot dot dot. And so, all along the way for me, it wasn't a crystal clear, seamless, transparent, velvety ride. It was the opposite. It was murky. It was ups and downs. It was janky. It was times when I wanted to quit it. And so I think maybe the most important thing I will say is that if I hadn't have felt all of that, if I hadn't have been like really in the mix and like doubting myself and not wanting to do it at times, if I hadn't have felt those things, then it would have been less important to me. Like, it just wouldn't have been as important as it turned out to be. Because generally speaking, and I know myself, and this is where it comes down to an individual ride, I believe. I know that when I'm feeling it the way I was feeling it, then it's counting. It means something. It matters, not just to me, but to others. And so when it was rough, that's good. That's a good sign for me. But, that's not an easy path either. So that's a different conversation, of course.
I got something on this, but Seb, looks like you got something too. What do you got?
Yeah, no, that's a very important nuance that Shaun, about clarity of intent, right? Like, you don't necessarily have that necessarily, but I would say that fundamentally you do, in the sense that you've been working on the same things, which is helping out the collective, so fundamentally, where it's going to go. You just don't know how it's going to get there.
That's right.
And so those are shifting anchors, so to speak, you have to reattach to as you're going, and having that adaptability to do that may or may not be, given to everybody. When you first start, you kind of want to have something with a little bit more clarity, if that's going to help you. But once you get to a point where fundamentally this is what you're about, then as things are evolving or devolving, or you're going forward and back and whatever, you can shift anchors and attach yourself to other things that are going to keep moving you forward. And that's discipline, really. I mean, it's difficult to do. It's not an easy thing to do. The friction, makes whatever endeavor that you are doing so much more meaningful in so many ways. But also at completion, where we're talking about, once you finally reach a desired, and I don't mean necessarily the desired outcome, because the outcome can be a certain thing, but once you've given your best, then the outcome ain't up to you anyways. And so you've given your best, and the outcome will be what the outcome is. That's like, we always make the analogy with if you do everything you do at each stages of a course of fire while shooting, then theoretically you should pass, but if you don't, because there's additional factors that you couldn't have foreseen or prevented or whatever, then you did all you could have done anyways. So, you should be happy with what you have done, whether or not it reaches, the summit that you were aiming for. If you aim for the stars all the time, and if you aim for the stars all the time, oftentimes in the context of creation, you don't hit the stars all the time. That's just life. You got to create some duds in order to create some meaning.
It kind of reminds me of, I was trying to explain this to my son the other day, about bracketing. Mm-hmm. Like when you're measuring for more calling in direct fire or something like that, indirect fire, I should say. But this caught me a second ago, Shaun, when you mentioned you being in a cave. You kind of were, right? Like you were.
I was
outside of your normal comfort zone.
Sure.
You were and it reminded me of Musashi's Waterfall, mm-hmm. right? Like when he went out there specifically to learn how to do something different, right? How to be stable in an unstable situation constantly, right? And I think that's what happened for you, at least from the outside looking in. You got to a place that was totally not your normal everyday routine. And all of a sudden your mind went, holy cow, look at all this, and tried to synthesize it instantly. And then you got your image, and then you were like, well, now I got to put it out because everybody needs to hear about this, which is
Well, you know, the worst part of it was that when it occurred, when not the idea, but when the moment occurred, and again, this isn't like a revelation. It wasn't like it wasn't mystical, I would say. It was something that was bound to happen in time. It just happened to occur over there. But it was possibly the most inconvenient location for it to occur because back in my office, I've got big screens that I could have shaved my workload in half. And of course, I've got a office setup. You know, I'm comfortable here. Everything I need is here. But over there, I was like, it'd be 3 o'clock in the morning on a rough hostel bed, you know, propping myself up with a pillow, and like the extension cord for the power outlet is stretched to the max. You know, if I move half an inch one way, it unplugs itself. And listen, it was less than ideal while I was doing all of this. And it was frustrating because it was so not ideal. It was almost the opposite of ideal. But I gotta say that I took a certain satisfaction in knowing that not only was I doing something hard, it was about as hard as it could get. I mean, other than me having to type underneath a literal waterfall. And so I kind of took some, not perverse satisfaction, but some sort of, not pride, but I took away something from that whole process of it couldn't have been much harder than it was. And I still managed to kind of produce something that at least Seb and I can work with in the near future here. And if I would have created what I've created this week, but it would have been smooth sailing, I wouldn't have appreciated it as much. And so, you know, I couldn't have made it much harder on myself. And so still managed to get her done. And that's something that I do take satisfaction from throughout my life. A lot of the things that I've done that are really hard give me a certain sense of not legitimacy, but faith maybe in myself or belief in myself that no matter what, when things are going super sideways, I'm going to get her done. And I think more people should seek that kind of situation where they're doing something hard already, but the circumstances have made it so hard that you really, really earn it. It's a really satisfying feeling.
I agree. It is a satisfying feeling. It makes me think of the fact, I think it, for me at least, I'm going to go with my own thought on this. I didn't switch my person here. Is that it's understanding that if I want to create anything, it's going to cost, like I have to pay of myself in order to do it. So that I think with talking with other people, creation for them seems almost magical. Like you can just, I can create stuff out of nothing. But just even the thought process requires a level of effort that I don't know if people are prepared for, if that makes sense.
Well, hang on a sec. So there's a wild difference between creating an idea and creating an outcome.
For sure. Yeah,
Okay?
that's what I mean.
So I know tons of people who are the good idea fairy,
sure.
create all kinds of things. But then, you know, you're 600 hours later. And if you're not willing to put in 600 hours on a book, then that little moment that took 1 second will never go any further. You've got to be willing to not just accept the reality, but you've kind of like almost got to embrace the reality that it's just going to be bonkers hard. Because anything that's worth doing is going to be freaking hard. And so, you know, if the book would have taken me 3 hours to write, man, I'd have paid someone not to buy it. And so I think there should be a sting to everything that has value, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Agreed. Seb, what do you got?
Yeah, I mean, that's where creativeness intersects with discipline, and really, if it doesn't, I got some bad news. And we've spoken about this before. You know, you start anything. At first, you get dopamine hits out of this. You know, you have an actual physiological response, and that keeps you motivated because that's all it is, a little epinephrine and a few things, hormones kicking into your body. But man, you know, once you're on rewrite number 18 for the very first chapter and you got 10 chapters to go, you'll see that the motivation will fade at the speed of light. And it's really important to understand that that is precisely when it's important to push. You know, when I was young, I was sitting in a bathroom somewhere, I can't remember where, and there was a poster, and it said, there was somebody at the top of a mountain, and it said, on the last 100 meters to the top of the mountain, nobody's left. And it just stayed with me because it is true. That's precisely what has to happen. You know, and that in itself can be an anchor. Knowing that most people would have quit can be an anchor for certain people if in the right frame of mind. You know, knowing, and I know for me, I was very much like that. If a course of any kind, or a task of any kind had a really high attrition rate, it motivated me rather than demotivating me, or scared me into submission. Instead, it became fuel. You know, and that's not necessarily how everybody operates, but I think that there is a way to make it a little bit more that way by simply engaging about it cognitively. I think that knowing about it is the first step to understanding that it's actually occurring and that you can affect it, or at least influence it.
This is there's so many good points here, and I think I guess I want to ask you guys this. Do you think that it for most people when they quit something, do you think it is just because it's hard, or do you think that because it becomes like personal? So it's no longer like I have to put in so many hours. I'm going to put in 15 hours and it's going to work, or like now I got to take personal time from something else to get this done. Do you think that where it changes, where it's no longer just like this is tough versus now I actually have to sacrifice to do the thing, is where they quit? Is that, you guys tracking on what I'm talking about here? Shaun, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm tracking, and there's. So here's the irony of how I'm going to answer this. As I was experiencing it myself, I was writing about how to counter it in the book, and so that means that like I was experiencing that not frustration, but that almost want for the book to be done. And I'm only 300 hours in, and I can see that I've got like another 300 hours, and every hour that I'm putting in, I almost want the book to be done. But every hour that goes by, I don't want the book to be done because I want it to be done right. And I want it to feel like it was earned rather than just appeared magically. And so, the irony is that as humans, we have three states really of time travel. We have, forward time travel where we try to live in the future, where I'm like, man, when this book is done 300 hours from now, I'm just going to be so happy. Like, that's how we work. Then the other time travel, we travel backwards. And so we're thinking about, man, why did I even start this? But now that I'm in it, how can I shortcut it? And so, there's that time travel. And then there's the time travel that is, traveling in the present. And that's generally where we tend to go inside of ourselves and try to rationalize it all, make the cost make sense, make the time make sense, make the decision make sense. And so, the times where I was struggling with the book was when I was time traveling to the future or to the past. Where the book made the most sense to me, and where maybe it wasn't the easiest to write, but where it felt the most right, is when I was living with it in the moment. And so I think, to answer your question, maybe Chance, is this, that the penchant for humans is to time travel to the future or to the past. And often it's the future where they can almost taste the win. They can almost smell, the victory soup or whatever at the finish line, but they ain't there yet. And it's that dissonance between, I'm working towards the finish line, but I want to be on the finish line. It's those two moments that collide regularly on any big project. And the bigger the project, the more they collide. And then again, the irony for me is a chunk of the book that I was writing was about being freaking in the moment, like being right in this moment right now, just like all three of us are right in it. But at the same time, there was a part of me that was like 300 hours ahead. You know what I'm saying?
100%. Seb, what are you thinking?
Oh man, there's so much here because that's an interesting conversation to have. Like I think that a lot of people assume, and people even will use this to sort of disable their own doing. It's like, well, you were able to, not feel that way. Well, it has nothing to do with not feeling that way. It has everything to do with recognizing that you are feeling that way and actually addressing it and continuing on. Like it doesn't have to be perfect. None of it is. We all experience the same emotions. We all want to quit. We all want to leave. We all want to, and when I say quit, I don't mean quit completely, but quit on a portion of what it is that we are doing, whether it's maybe making it not nearly as good as it could be, just so we could be done a little faster. I mean, temptations will always be around us in so many realms, and we have a choice to make. We either give into them, or we recognize them in time, and we don't fall into the traps. The question you were pausing earlier about the hard, and I realized that what you described was all hard. That's what makes up hard. The difference is, and where the friction comes in, is theoretical hard versus operational hard. Theoretically, it's going to be hard, and you can use your lips to articulate what that's going to feel like until it happens. And when it happens, it's way harder. That's just a reality. We know it's a reality of the competitive floor. We know it's a reality of most sports at the highest levels. We know, if you're running, and I won't speak to mountain bike because I don't know anything about this, but I will say this. I mean, you don't show up on a CrossFit competitive floor and lift the 500-pound squat that you had in the gym. You don't get on the jiu-jitsu mats and act like a black belt, unless you've been there so often that. And so generally there's such a degradation when the reality hits. If you take somebody that has aspiration to be an MMA fighter and do all the things and be out there and putting themselves out there, just put them through a hard MMA class, and generally that dream fizzles as soon as the first class is done, unless they really have it, right? And unless there's something that's really that's real. It's not based upon fallacy or a theoretical sacrifice, so to speak. They actually understand what hard means because they've been in it. Now, the other thing is, for me anyways, that really helps me keeping things sort of in perspective and in check as I'm engaging into something, is not allowing myself to hit that finish line. And this is what I mean by this. And I'm pretty sure most people will be able to relate to this. And I guess if you're not, maybe I'm weird. I don't know. But for me, it's way easier to drive 19 hours than 4.5 hours. And the reason why that is there is zero end in sight. So I don't even wander off there at all. It's like there's no end in sight. It's one day at a time, 1 minute at a time, one this at a time. I'm one podcast at a time, one moment of stillness at the time. Whatever it is that you fill the time with or not, as you are engaging in that process, you wake up 16 hours has passed. But once you have a 4.5 hour drive, the entire time since the moment that you sat down, this won't be very long, and you're already attaching yourself to the outcome, and the minutes are like, or the seconds rather,
It's funny. I've chosen now, when I have short drives like that, and I say short drives like 3 hours going from Edmonton to Calgary or something like that. It is a burner because I've done it so many times, and it's so hard not to just like disassociate and let the drive happen. But you're right. When I drove to Ontario, that was 3 days, and it was like, you're just going to drive until it gets dark, or you drive until you get tired, or you're just going to drive. That you have to kind of accept that that's going to happen. It is, it's awesome. I got a couple comments here I want to touch on. Lisa jumped in here, said hello everyone, good afternoon from Henley, Texas. Good to see you, Lisa. Salty jumped in here, Grey Ward. What's on the other side of the first step is either more important than what's telling you to stop, or it's not. Well, that's a good point. I want to touch on that in a second one. And then Dan C jumped in here and said, every creation starts with an outcome in mind. The process turns it into a gong show. We learn from the gong show, and that becomes a creation, kind of like turning a bowl. Oh, that's a good analogy. I like that. You guys got any thoughts on either of those? I'm going to hit you, Shaun. What do you think?
Yeah, well, to Salter's comment, like the moment that you step through that door or that first step is called information. And so whether that's a win or a loss, failure or gain, whatever the case is, it's information, it's data. And so, to tie this to the podcast we did the other day with Garmin, data collection, and I said that I'm a lifelong fan of collecting data as a data coach. You can never have enough data. And I feel that's the same with when you take that first step. As your foot is in midair, you should be collecting data, not when your foot hits the first step. And the second step that you take, you should have had like 12 points of data. And then that next step, there should be 24 points of data. And so the data should be accumulating on every move that you make. And I think the way that Salters has put that together, what's on the other side of the first step, I know he doesn't think this way, but I want to use it as maybe a cautionary sentence, because people will give away their agency through that sort of sentencing. What's on the other side? Well, forget about what's on the other side. What are you in right now? The moment is almost subordinated to the next moment, but the next moment is next. Don't worry about the next. Worry about where you're at right now. And the right now will take you to the next. And so it's not maybe what's on the other side of your first step. It's what's inside of you before you take the first step. And I know that's a bit philosophical, but I really feel strongly about that a lot of people will subordinate their agency to what's that next thing.
Seb, got anything?
Yeah, there's not much to add other than I was thinking along the same lines. The issue isn't the next step, is losing sight of what the next step is or why you're taking it. That's causing the issue. So having that from the inception is obviously key. And then sometimes you're going to take a feel step, as Shaun was alluding to earlier, when you can start questioning where it's going and how it's going there. But this is, again, reinforcing the concept of having the adaptability. Like, you have to have the adaptability to start looking at where is your next anchor, where is your what can you do with the moment that you are in currently, and how can it serve the desired outcome, whatever that is. And the desired outcome may be very general. It doesn't have to be steeped with specificity. I think that a lot of us often think that if I set myself a certain goal, it has to be so specific. Well, no, it could be general, and that opens up all kinds of options. And again, it becomes your mission statement. And when you have your mission statement, then it becomes a case of mission execution. And when you have what do we know about mission execution? You have to be flexible with that, because otherwise the lack of flexibility will be doing you in. And so, yeah.
This is what do you got?
There's something that is interesting about Salter's sentence, and that first step. So I think one of the things that people see in their mind's eye when they see that first step is they see like a clear day, like a bright lighting. They can see as far as the horizon. They can see their own shoelaces. They can see where they're about to step. But take it in a different direction. That first step is in the pitch black. And so maybe it's on a balance beam in the pitch black. So that first step is going to be way more calculated, way more careful, way more sensitive. And so when you're moving in the pitch black, the way you move your steps is way different than in daylight. And so it's that in the pitch black, you're almost like an explorer, like an adventurer. Like you have to have a certain sort of curiosity in midair and how you put your foot down. You have to have a certain granularity, certain sensitivity to the moment. And in the pitch black, you don't move fast. You move with sensitivity. And so, these first steps that a person takes, if you imagine taking them in the pitch black, you'll be a lot more sensitive to the moment, a lot more careful in your movements versus in broad daylight. So the example being that if you're stepping into something that you are unsure of, almost treat it like it's nighttime, like just ease your way in very sensitively, very carefully, with some sense of the moment, rather than believing that the step has already been taken.
This brings up some interesting thoughts in my mind, and it reminds me of when I'm hunting, and there's a point where you have to not just slow down, but you have to be so extra careful that your movement becomes really, really, really small leaps of faith kind of every time. You got to put your foot out in a certain way to touch the ground without disturbing anything, but at the same time, feel it out. Whereas on a big, open, wide, flat piece of ground, I got to move quickly and I got to be able to stride through that area quite way less carefully than I would when I get into the trees and it gets dark and it gets there's animals nearby and things like that. And I think this is I guess maybe the question I have for you guys on this is the line between a leap of faith versus moving in the dark. Because a leap of faith, I mean, I think you have to take leaps of faith in the creative process. There's leaps that you have to take on a regular basis, and you're going to have to put your foot down in places in the dark that you don't know. But how do you gauge that? If somebody's never done it before and they're just entering into this creative process of their lives, how do they perhaps shorten that leap of faith than lengthen it? I guess that's what I'm getting at. Seb, I'm going to hit you first. What do you got?
Yeah, I don't know if I got it, but I think for me, it's less about a leap of faith and more about what are the consequences associated with failing. For example, what are the consequences associated with taking that leap of faith? Are you falling off a building, or are you like not succeeding and starting again and live to see another day? Like, it really doesn't matter. It does matter what the outcome is. So it does matter what the context of that leap of faith is going to be, right? Would you tell your sons to take a leap of faith while driving, or would you tell them, so at the end of the day, what are the consequences? And I think one of the things that we do very, very well as humans is we often overinflate the risk, and we overinflate the risk with all kinds of irrelevant factors: fear of embarrassment, like all kinds of things, like name him. I don't want to go down the list of things that we all know we do as humans, but the bottom line is this: like, you can write off probably 90% of those things because they really don't matter. That's your ego talking. That's you being afraid of being exposed. That's you afraid of not succeeding at something. That's you afraid of having to tell people that you didn't succeed. Like, there's a lot of external factors, noise as it were, that can be completely evaporated. And if that's evaporated, then your leap of faith becomes a lot less of a risky endeavor, But I think that we're automatically, almost automatically, or at least I know for myself, I've done that, in the past, is associating a certain degree of either physical harm or psychological harm or some sort of risk, as if I was evaluating risk through the lens of, say, somebody that has to assess risk for a living, right? Weird. But I think if you look, and we might have touched on this before, but business people will grab a bunch of noodles and toss them on the wall, and whatever sticks, one of them will stick, and one of the, here's the plan. And I'm obviously, they'll be intentional with this, they'll be deliberate with this, there's all kinds of factors, but what are the consequences? If the consequences aren't catastrophic, well, here's your left and right of arc. This is how you're going to find out what you're sort of all about, because you're going to test the limits in ways that are not catastrophic, just as Shaun alluded to earlier, taking steps that are reasonable for the environment.
I dig it. Shaun, any thoughts?
Yeah, one other thought on, and it's a bit of a stretch, bit of a reach, but one of the things about taking super careful steps in the pitch black is it's quite tiring until you get used to it. Like, there's a lot of muscle tension, there's a lot of there's a lot of physiology, a lot of emotional, and a lot of mental tension when you're stealthing through the pitch black, especially if there's trouble ahead of you. And so all that tension is quite tiring until you get used to it. And so that is one of the aspects of creating things is it doesn't much matter which vector you come at it from, whatever you're trying to create and whatever kind of a creator you are and however you start creating it, there's going to be a cost to it, especially if you're new to it. And even if you've been in creation for 5, 10 years, whatever the case is, and you've got it nailed, you're a seasoned pro, everything feels pretty easy. The moment that you try a new vector, stand by to get tired again, because you're going to have that muscle tension, you're going to have that emotional tension, that psychological sizzle from stealthing in the pitch black, that new thing to you. So, I don't think anyone should be confused by wanting to create something and getting into it for a year or two and then thinking, I got it nailed. It's all smooth sailing from now on, because it surely isn't. Unless, of course, you settle easily. If you settle with your work, if you settle with mediocrity, guess what? You'll never be frustrated by your work. But if you hold yourself to high standards in whatever you're doing, then there's no easy ride, and I don't think it ever gets a whole lot easier, if I'm being honest.
What do you got, Seb?
Sorry.
All
Jump
good.
on this mic, man. I haven't been on podcast in so long. Yeah, so much fun. So one of the risks of the creation process is tunnel vision, right? And tunnel vision goes against is it at odds with creation, really. When you look at creation, and if I was to put together a very quick sentence, you say formulating something differently, right? Really is what it is. Like whatever it is, I want to come up with something different from what I normally do, different from what everybody does, different from, just apply the word difference in whatever capacity in that fulfills that role. And so when sometimes doing something that's completely unrelated to the creation process really helps the creation process. So I'm going to argue that Shaun going to Japan and trying to do this outside of his office, outside the comfort zone, in a completely foreign country, while negotiating a family vacation, while doing, X, Y, and Z in a different environment with all kinds of, with all that entails, different foods and different things and different, like, makes the brain work in a way that's conducive to have different point of views all of a sudden. So you've changed your context in order to help and assist with the creation process. If I'm dwelling on something, say I need a creative idea in dealing with any dilemma in my life, whether they're personal, interpersonal, whatever the case may be, and I keep on repeating the same pattern, which is staying exactly where I'm at and being in my head like I'm in a prison of sort with the keys in my pocket, maybe going to the lake, or do something completely different, go bungee jumping for all I care, and make sure that you're tied up. But if you're tied up, you should be able to problem solve after. But the point I'm making is, you have to, sometimes if you get stuck, I know for me anyways, if I get stuck in creating, I will completely evaporate the problem until I did something different, right? Like I will go and engage in life in whatever other realm, do something completely shocking, do something completely illegal always, but do something, that by all standard would be, inherently disconnected, but we are all connected. All our systems are connected. So when you start pulling on pulleys, the other side moves and everything. So if you want to get a good shake off while in the creating process, that's something that's worked wonders for me. Just completely disconnect from it, break the tunnel vision, go do something that's unrelated. Even if you're on a bit of a timeline, if you're stalled, I get some bad news. Your timeline is not going any longer and you're not moving any faster. So you might as well just take a little bit more time and move more efficiently after. But I think that as part of the creation process, the secondary task or the proxy task is to recreate yourself in the creation process, you know? So you have two concurrent things going. You have the creation itself, and you have the recreation, and you have the recreation of your anchor, or of your purpose, or of the meaning attached to whatever it is that you're doing, by way of anchors that you have to create. You have the stalls that you're going to inherently run into that you have to kind of overcome, and one way to do that is to recreate your change the context, change the environment, recreate the context, whatever the case may be. So just something to consider when you're struggling or stalling.
This is clicking in my brain a little bit here, and I the term recreate and recreate are very similar. They're basically the same word, but they mean slightly different things. But you can very easily use them together. And something I just wanted to touch on from what Shaun said as well, the settling for mediocrity is something that caught my brain. And in the creation process, we can very easily settle for mediocrity. But I think, for me at least, I always saw mediocrity as like a regression. Like I've fallen back into old ways. Now I'm settling for prior things. But what I've realized now is that the mediocrity portion is when whatever it is I'm doing, that becomes the norm. If that becomes the mediocratic moment for me. So like if I do jujitsu and I go to the same class at the same time every day, and I'm not really doing anything to advance myself, I'm just showing up because I normally show up there, then I've settled for mediocrity versus seeking to better myself through that thing, if that makes sense. So I found that realization just recently, is the fact that if I'm actively creating something, that I'm no longer settling. But if I've stopped creating or recreating in that moment, then I'm settling for mediocrity. This is just a fascinating conversation for me. I had another couple questions here, but Shaun, you got any other thoughts on anything before we move on?
Yeah, just on the mediocrity aspect, since you touched on it, I think that's a constantly moving line. The moment that you get better at something, you just established a new level of mediocrity unless you punch forward past that. That's the evolutionary game. And so that's why we're not supposed to be still 16 years old, with all of the mistakes still to be made. We're supposed to evolve. And I think that, it's interesting that you raise your idea of what mediocrity was to you, I guess. I've never really thought of it that way. And, the moment that you were saying it, I was like, oh, man, I bet there's a ton of people that probably look at it that way as well. But I've never thought of it that way. To me, mediocrity is a constantly evolving line that you move past, rather than just kind of hang out in. So that's really fascinating.
That's just a brand new realization for me too. So it was actually the other day when you hit me over the break while you were still overseas, and you're all like, oh, I guess you settled for mediocrity then. And I was like, wait a second. And it took me a minute to really find out what you meant by that. And then I realized that it was it's the setting of a bar, and then coming up to that bar, that's your new mediocratic level. And you move on. So it's been fascinating. Seb, what were you going to say? I saw you jumping up to the mic. What do you got?
Well, no, but I think we've discussed this before, right? Like the risk of the pre-made statement that everybody has seen on the T-shirt, be comfortable, stay comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I think, and I like this statement. It's a great statement, and it has all kinds of depth and meaning. But I think what the risk is if I'm doing something that's deemed difficult, and I've been doing it for quite some time, to the point where it's no longer as difficult for me, but I continue engaging at the same velocity, I'm essentially comfortable again, right? So it doesn't matter if an external or a third party looks at this going, wow, that's crazy. It's a crazy workout regimen. You're looking at Olympic athletes, for example, training, doing all the things. But at that point, somebody at that level with a fundamental level of mediocrity that's similar could look at this and say, you've settled here a bit. So
100%.
that's why it's important to kind of do this for ourselves. It's not the comparison game. Like, we as humans immediately have to compare all the time, and it's like there's nothing wrong with gaining perspective through comparison, but you have to follow. You have to look at yourself, because one day you'll find yourself being the top dog in a room, and that doesn't make you the top dog. You're just a top dog in that room, and we've seen it with some stables back in the old MMA days, Lions Den and whatnot. As soon as they fought somebody outside the gym, they weren't as good as they thought they were, and they were all much better than me. I'm not. This isn't a knock on Lions Den. It's just a reality. You find yourself to be the product of your environment. You are going to elevate to the level that you can within the confines of that, and if you don't pay attention, you will be mediocre, even if you're, from an outside perspective, are a high performer.
You can be really good and mediocre at the same time.
Exactly.
That is the truth, though.
Yeah,
That
it
is the
is.
truth.
Yeah, I dig it. Now, I have this last question I want to ask you guys specifically was, I think I could probably answer for you, but in anything that you've created, when you look back on the different things that you've created in your life, and you look at the struggles that preceded them and got to a point where you either successfully or did not successfully complete whatever objective you were looking for, would you do it again, I guess is the question. Looking back, if you knew the price ahead of time, if you knew what you were going to go through at any point, would you, I guess, regret it, or would you do it again? What do you think, Seb?
Life is the process. Like, I don't know where you're going, but you're going to use your time doing something. It either brings immediate value in terms of outcome, or it brings value in terms of process. But there is really none of those, unless you're idling and you're sitting there, not engaging in the process, not engaging in the life, not trying to create or to do any of the things that make you engage in life. Well, that's something that you might regret, because obviously you're not engaging in life. That's a total life disengagement. But if you're engaging in life, and you're out there doing things and poking and prodding and philosophizing and doing things in actuality and bringing all these things together, you're going to mess up, say stupid things. You're going to fail at things. You're going to do things mediocrely. You're going to do things well. That's just life. And I think that for us to stand here in the bodies and the minds and the souls of the people that we are now and look backwards and say, I wish I didn't do any of those things, who do you think you'd be talking to? Like, it doesn't work that way, like, you don't get to remove the friction and then be the same person at the end. That's kind of how I look at it.
100%. Shaun, what do you got?
Do you care to ask your question in another way, or do you want to hit it from another angle?
Well, basically, the way I was looking at it was the fact that I think there are many people that perhaps wish they could have their cake and eat it too. Right? Like, they want to be able to not go through the pain and still get the outcome. I think that, and I'm wondering if there's anything in your guys' lives that where you either agree with that for that in that moment, or that one piece, or do you think that that's just a weak statement that is not applicable to life?
No, I think you're right. I think there's quite a lot of people out there who want to eat the cake and don't want to bake the cake. They want the ride for free, but they want the 3-ticket ride for free. And so, for sure, that's a thing. But I will say this, that, using the book as an example that just kind of came out of, that was crazy. That was a crazy hard thing in my life. And so I'll say this, that you can't do those things constantly. Like, these are things that maybe you've got a dozen in you in your life. And by a dozen, I mean like one of them is passing selection. And then another one is like whatever. You've maybe got a dozen things in your life that are just freaking bonkers. And so you can't squander those things. When that thing comes up, like, sink your teeth into it and freaking get after it. Because every time you let one slide by, I don't think you get a repeat. Like, I don't think you get, like, if you've got 12 in your life and you look at something that shows up in front of you and you think, no, I'm not interested. Well, now you've got 11, and now you've got 10, and now you've got 6. And now what? So, like these big things that come up, I think you got to look them square in the eye and decide what kind of person you are. You're either in or you're out. And if you're in, then you go in all the way and see how far you can take that thing. And whatever you learn along the way is what you learn. But what you do learn, I think, generally speaking, is a lot about yourself. And so the 12 hard things that you get to do in your life, 10, 8, 37 things, whatever the number is, like, when you're into it, when you're doing it, you should be learning about yourself while you're in it. It shouldn't just be like a thankless grind. It shouldn't be. I mean, when I was writing the book, I wasn't really talking to anyone. I wasn't interacting with anyone. I was like literally in my little Musashi cave, and I've only just come out of it. And so Seb saw some of what I was doing, but not enough for me to have like confidence, not enough for me to have sort of a sense of ease in if what I'd done had any value. And so then the greater question is, well, what is value? If I spent 600 hours as like a lunatic, if I would have written something that was like in hieroglyphics and didn't make any sense, if it was the ramblings of a madman for 600 hours, then is there any value in that? Well, there is to me, if I can make sense of it, if I learned something in the process, irrespective of what the outcome is in the way of a book, the process was so hard that I learned a lot about myself. And so it's maybe less about the book, and it's more about, as cliche as it sounds, it's more about the journey or the path that you walk while you're doing these things. And so, yeah, I don't think there's an easy answer to your question, Chance. It's very much probably an individual thing, but it's certainly something that a person should think a lot about in their life for sure.
Yeah, I think it definitely needs to be processed, and I've always seen value is a great thing to really dive into in your life, and what has value, what does value even mean to you? And value for me was always something that, like, well, I had to realize that what I value is what I actually have to value it. So, I can look at something that is quote unquote valuable. I could have a very expensive guitar, or I could have, I was showing off, I have a hat from Tim Hortons that I won with a roll up the rim back in Afghanistan that are apparently worth quite a bit now. So like, I can have physical things that are valuable. But if I don't value them, if I don't actively value them, then they're worthless, really. And that goes to our accomplishments. But I think it goes to our accomplishments, and the fact that the things that we do and the actions that we take, we have to value them more than value is placed on them by others, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I don't agree with that either. I mean, I think that at some point in anyone's life, you'll do something that's hard, so hard that you don't want to do it, and is valued enough by others that you will, if you're kind of driven that way. And so, as an example, like, there was a time when I was writing the book, and it's not that I was done, I was like close to a breaking point of, man, this is just too much. I took on something at the wrong time in my life where I shouldn't be doing it on my freaking vacation. And so that was starting to enter into my mind. And so then what did I do? I looked at it from a different angle. And Doreen, my wife, was like really taking care of me. Like, she'd be out running in Whereversville in Vietnam, and then she'd run back and she'd bring back food for me. Because sometimes I just wasn't leaving. I'd just be like writing nonstop. And so if she wasn't looking after me, then I wouldn't have been able to write. And so by her looking after me, I gained other value than just writing a book. And so the process itself, no matter what the cost is to me, I should be able to see the value around me on a 360 if I'm really paying attention. And I could see the value not just for the book, but for for my relationship, for my life, for just people who were in my day to day while I was in Vietnam. The book gave life itself some other meaning, a different way for me to see another layer in life that I hadn't seen before I started writing the book. And so, it shouldn't just be about looking for the intensity of the difficulty of the moment that you're currently in. There's many layers that you can look at this from different vectors that will give you a sense of maybe not purpose, but a sense of meaningfulness that can just take you, into that next day, as it were.
I dig it. Zed, what do you got?
Yeah, I think when when you're quantifying things in a very linear way, and we're talking about, say, in this case of the example that you use, and I'm not suggesting that you just limit it to the example that you used, but if you're comparing anything that's, say, physical property versus spiritual, mental, emotional value, those types of things are much harder to quantify, but they're much more important. So linearly, it's easy to assign a financial value to an object and understand how much work it takes to achieve this. If I want to buy this car, I need to work this hard. It doesn't tell the picture. It doesn't tell the whole picture. Not only does it not tell the whole picture, but it's worthless. It actually is. All of those things are. And so it's not that you can't have a nice car, and drive it here and there and everywhere and appreciate it, but it definitely shouldn't be your anchoring mechanisms for the various realms, the development that you are going to need in this life to experience this life, in optimized in the way that Shaun is describing through the process. So what ended up happening here is there was a strengthening of relationship. There's a whole bunch of things that happened as a result of that. Put a value on that. Like, you can't, and if you're comparing this at if one of those things, take all of the other realms and take one of those things, say the relational value, and compare it to a car, I don't care what you're putting on the other side of that. Like, you are not in the same galaxy, right? It's just a physical property. You shouldn't care about that, but we do. We get sucked in that thing, right? Like, but for me, it's so much deeper than what meets the eye. And I think that's what's important, intuitively, and sort of exceed the cognitive realm a bit and go a little deeper in that.
I agree. And I guess I misillustrated my point. What I was trying to get at was the fact that the value that we place on things it's our value. It has nothing to do with the physical value, because if we're talking about cars, perhaps I spent 600 hours building a car with my dad, right? That physical car is going to have way more value than the actual book value of the car, right? And that's what I'm talking about, is that
Yes.
that self-prescribed value that I place on it, because, as you're saying, Shaun, you saw the value in the relationship, you saw the value in the team building and the being able to take care of each other, and those things. That value outweighed the time value of you sitting on the pain value, I guess, of you sitting on the computer.
Became
Well,
invaluable.
there is one thing that is important to add. Our wives look after us, of course, and I'd be a mess if I didn't have Doreen in my life, for sure.
Me too.
But it is interesting to me that because I was pushing myself so hard on vacation, I saw her kind of elevate her game like to that next level. And it's not that she has never done that before. Like, it's not that she's incapable of that. What I am saying is that she recognized how hard I was working. And then I recognized that she recognized that. And she was like supporting me in ways that weren't overt. Like, they weren't discussed. They were implicit, not explicit. And so it was an undercurrent that I'd noticed like days into it, and it had been going on for, in hindsight I could see how many days it had been going on prior to that, but it's kind of important to maybe push yourself in a way that if we're talking about creating something in life, push yourself so hard that you start to maybe not draw out the best of those around you, but you see other aspects of people in your life that are there for you when you're doing the thing that you're doing. It's kind of, it's insightful.
It really is. What do you got, Seb?
Just make sure it's not a one-way street.
Yes.
Right. I think there's people that take on the next thing and the next thing and the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, and it's always the same person doing the supporting. So it has to be a balanced act, right?
Agreed. And I was gonna add to your point, Shaun, is that Amber has been the rock for the collective, right? This would not be around if it wasn't for her support throughout all of this, because she did the exact same thing that you're talking about, is that she just took on a whole bunch of extra roles because I was busy with the show, especially the first year. Oh my goodness, that was quite the run. Now we're a little bit over an hour here. I got a couple comments I want to touch on, but any other points you want to hit before we jump into that? Okay. Brandon Chase jumped in here. So I could see you, Brandon. Salty Jinx jumped in. He said, I think the personal depth of what you want to create has a weight on that as well. What you have to invest and the velocity you have to invest, it changes the line for your mediocrity. That's a good point. Yeah, I think so. Tanya Lamb jumped in here, said, I could see it, Tanya. I think self-actualized people know that A, you can't predict what lesson and experience will teach you, and B, pain is the price of admission for growth. Yep, I agree with that one. And then she adds in, I determine mediocrity by assessing if my attempt went above my perceived capacity. If I went above plus can't do any better, then it's not mediocre, even if the outcome is unsuccessful. Yeah, I like it. I dig it. With that, any final thoughts? Anything at all still bubbling around the back of your head? Seb, cost of creation. What do you got?
It's funny for Tanya here. Right here, it says adversity induce refinement and growth. So I totally, obviously we're all very familiar with that concept, and I think that is a big part of what this life journey is all about, and optimizing it is all about. And so no, that's it for me. I'm out in the creation process, and just go out there and create something for yourselves, for others. Doesn't matter. Let's just start with something and challenge yourself. We do daily, right?
I dig it. Shaun, any final thoughts?
Yeah, just on the cost of creation, I'd like to tweak it a little bit right at the final end there. And maybe it's not the cost of creation, it's the reward of creation. And so the payback that you get by paying a minor entry fee for creation, you will reap the benefits on the back end. And if it's not a personal sort of collection process, the people around you will gain from it, of course. Using Tanya as an example, her photography drives some of my photography. Her inspirational abilities have me aspirationally pursuing some of her abilities to some degree. And so, her creation and the people around me who create, the reward for me is that I'm inspired. I have aspirations because of that. And so there is a cost to creation, but there is also a reward to it as well.
I really like that. And then we got a couple last minute comments here. Tanya jumped in here. Saying it's not mediocre, it's a step towards excellence. So I think that's the continuation from prior. Dan C says, have a great weekend, gentlemen. Play safe. Tom Sandler. Good to see you, Tom. I like that. Yeah, and I guess I'm going to go back to my first thought on the cost of creation, and that is you get what you get at the end of it. You get what you put into it, right? That is the key. If you really put your soul into creation, well, then the value that you get out of that, the value creation there comes with what you put into it, and you just got to put into it. to begin with. That's what I got.
I don't agree with that. But
You don't agree with that right off the
No, I
bat?
don't.
Bam! He's at the end. No, I don't agree with you at all.
I don't agree with that either.
Another way to
Well, it depends what he means, right? Like,
It
'cause
does. It does.
Yeah.
And so I can't just give it a general blank, a big green check mark for sure.
what I mean is that the cost. Let's not get into it. We can get into it another day. That's a whole other podcast.
That's right.
Because there's a whole other podcast.
That's right.
We can talk about that another time. As I do in the moment, learn, build, and grow.
Chimo.
Thanks everybody for watching and being part of the collective. If this has sparked any thoughts or resonated with you, let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us grow and keeps the conversation going. We'll see y'all next time.